Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about what I've learned so far in the web development class. The main thing we learned for this now is the merge stack. The merge stack is a popular and powerful technology which represents React.js, Node.js, Express.js, and MongoDB. I know that until now we have only learned HTML, CSS, and plain vanilla JavaScript, but I'm still going to talk about React because it just goes along with the other three so well. And it is very so for the front end, we use the React, and it's a JavaScript library that's responsible for the client-side part of the application. It uses a component-based architecture, which allows the developers to create reusable UI components that can be composed to build complex user interfaces. It's known for its virtual DOM and the ability to efficiently update the UI, making it fast and responsive. And for the backend, the Node.js is used to run the server-side logic. It is a JavaScript runtime environment that allows you to execute JavaScript code on the server side. It's built on the V8's JavaScript engine and provides an event-driven, non-blocking input and output model. It handles tasks like routing, authentication, database communication. And in the Node.js, it's Express.js. It's a web application framework that simplifies the process of building web applications and APIs by handles routing, middlewares, and HTTP requests and response handling. And for the database, we learned MongoDB. It is a non-relational SQL database that stores data in a flexible JSON-like format known as BSON, which is binary JSON. It is well suited for handling large volumes of data and can scale horizontally by adding more servers. And MongoDB is a non-relational database, which means it doesn't require a fixed schema, allowing for more flexibility in how data is stored. In a MERN application, MongoDB is used to store data such as user information, posts, products, details, and more. By combining these four technologies, developers can create a full-stack web application where data flows seamlessly from the client to the server and back again. It's known for its performance, scalability, and ability to develop modern single-page application with a consistent user experience. So the first thing we learned is the HTML. It consists of many concepts like class, attributes, ID, head and body, DOM, and form. HTML class is an attribute that can be applied to HTML elements to group them together based on the common purpose or style. Classes are used to define a set of elements that share the same stylings or behavior. And HTML is a modifier provided within an HTML tag to define characteristics or properties of an element. Here are some examples of HTML attributes, like alt, which specifies an alternative text for an image. href specifies a URL for a link. Source specifies a URL for an image. And IDs, which specifies a unique ID for an element. And for HTML ID, it is a unique identifier assigned to a specific HTML element on the web page. Each ID must be unique, and meaning no two elements can share the same ID. In HTML head and body, for HTML head, this section contains metadata and information about the document, such as document's title, character encoding list, or external style sheets or scripts. In meta text, it is not visible to user and typically does not contain the main content of the body. And the body section contains the visible content of the web page. It includes text, images, links, and other elements that are present to the user. It's where the primary content is placed. And HTML DOM represents the document object model. It is a programming interface for a web document. It represents the structure of an HTML or XML document as a tree-like model where each element in the document is represented as a node in the tree. It provides a way for programs and scripts to access and manipulate the content and structure the web page dynamically. In HTML form are the elements that allow users to input data. These are the common form controls. For example, input for text input, checkbox, and so on. And for text area, it is for multi-lining the text input. And for select, it is for drop-down lists. And for button, it is for creating clickable buttons. And for label, it is for providing labels and descriptions for form control. And then we learned about CSS, and CS is including the how to use CSS to style a class, and how to style class inside a link. It's ID, the difference between ID and class, and RGBA and pixels, EMS, and paddings. And here is a CSS selector, and it selects the CSS elements by its tag name. For example, the elements selector is just the tag name itself, and the universal selector, it selects all elements on the page. It uses like a asterisk, and ID selector uses a hashtag with it selects a single element with a specific ID attribute. And for the class selector, it selects elements with a specific class attribute. And we can also style the CSS inline, but it's not recommended because it's going to be a mess. And it's going to, we really want a separate file to store our CSS. And for CSS RGBA, it means red, green, blue, and alpha. These are the values representing the level of the red, green, and blue components in the color. Each component, each color can be from 0 to 255, or percentage from 0% to 100%. And the alpha means the transparency level of a color. It can be a value from 0, which means completely transparent, to 1, which is fully opaque. And here are the CSS units. And for example, here are the units of some of the common units are pixels. Pixels is it represents 1 dot on the screen, and EM is a relative unit of measurement based on the font size of the element itself, and it's relevant to the current font size. And the percentage are relevant to the size of the containing element of the parent element. We also learned about the CSS paddings. It's very self-explanatory that from the outside to inside, it's margin, border, padding, and content. And later on, we learned the Bootstrap. The Bootstrap is a framework for CSS, and it has a very famous grid system. It is based on a 12 columns a grid system that allows you to create responsive and adaptive layouts. The container of its outermost elements that wraps all the rows and columns. And the rows are used to group columns horizontally. And so we can also use some like column small and column large or column medium to size each column. And then we learned beside after HTML and CSS, we learned the JavaScript, which we can make the page responsive, and the user can interact with a page. We talk about whether JavaScript is object oriented, its modules, patterns, variable hoisting, and class versus prototypes and array methods. And the question about this JavaScript object oriented, some people argue that it's not because there were no classes. But after 2015, the ES6 introduced classes to JavaScript. It supports association, aggregation, and composition. And besides that, it supports encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism, which are the key attributes of object-oriented programming language. Inheritance means JavaScript supports inheritance through the prototype-based inheritance. Objects can inherit properties and methods from other objects, forming prototype chains. Encapsulation for JavaScript, you can encapsulate data and behavior within objects to create self-contained modules. And for polymorphism, JavaScript allows you to use a same interface to interact with objects or different types, facilitating polymorphism. And JavaScript variable hoisting, which means it is behavior in JavaScript where a variable and functions declarations are moved to the top of the containing scope during the compilation phase. This means that regardless of where the variable or function is declared within the block of the code, it is as if it's declared at the top of the scope, making it accessible before it is actually the actual declaration of the code. And there is a difference between like declarations like a variable, let, and constant, and it shows on the table, and only variables are supporting the hoisting. And we also talk about classes versus prototypes. Classes in JavaScript provide a more structured and way of defining and creating objects. And the prototypes, on the other hand, are more low-level and flexible way to create objects. And for example, but they are kind of similar. And we use array methods in JavaScript. The two most important ones are splicing and slice. The splicings first parameter defines the position where new elements should be added. In the second parameter, it defines how many elements should be removed. And it helps us to remove and add elements to an array. And after that, we learned about Node.js. We learned about its NPM asynchronousness and its server. And for NPM, it is a very famous package manager. It manages packages tracking dependencies and simplifies the installation of the third-party libraries. And it does version control as well. And for nodes asynchronous, it is a fundamental concept that allows non-blocking execution of a code. It enables nodes to efficiently handle multiple tasks simultaneously without waiting for each other to complete before moving on to the next task. And it is crucial for handling input and output operations. And here is a way to create a node server. And then it is the code that we can run the node server on the local host 8000. And we also use express.js. It's a common framework, and you can use CRUD on express.js. And for MongoDB, it is a very famous database, non-relational database. We learned about its documents, collections, and the CRUD nature of it. And in MongoDB, the database is a container for storing and managing collections of data. Each database is separate, isolated storage space for related informations, and collections are analogs to tables in traditional relational database. There are groups of MongoDB documents, and each collection stores data of a particular type or category. It doesn't enforce a fixed schema, and inside the collections, it's the documents, and it's in our individual records and entries, and they're JSON-like objects that can be vary in structure and containing data in key value pairs. And also for the CRUD functions in MongoDB, which are the fundamental operations used to manage data in the database. Here are some very common functions like insert one, find one, update one, and delete one. So you can also use other functions like insert many or delete many, and update many. So now I'm going to talk about the express.js in MongoDB in depth. And first of all, when we create a web application, we want to create a node.js package. We use the npm. For example, we bring up the command line palette. And the way we do it is we type in npm init in it, and then we install all the dependencies found in package.json files. So here we require the express.js and Mongoose, and we also have the development dependencies like .env and nodemon for this project. And we use npm install to install all the dependencies. And later on, when we want to run the server, we really need this file server.js. And I'm going to explain it in detail. That the first line means it's used to load and configure .env module. .env module is this file that allows you to load environment variables from and it's a common practice for storing sensitive or configuration specific data like data URLs. Here I stored a MongoDB URL that is very confidential. And the second line imports the express.js framework. And the third line, it creates an instance of an express.js framework, which is later used to define the route and handle HTTP requests. And then I used a Mongoose. We learned about MongoDB native driver in this class, but here I decided to still learn about Mongoose. It is possibly very arguable because Mongoose has a fixed schema. It defines the structure of the subscriber documents in a MongoDB collections. Each subscriber document expected to have here a name, subscribed to channel, and subscribe date function date field. and those two fields are required. And I mean, this kind of schema is not available in the native um, MongoDB driver, and some people argue that why would you use MongoDB if you define a very structured way? Why don't you use MySQL? But I'm still going to use it just for the learning purpose and for creativity purpose. And so I still use Mongoose, and this line establish a connection with the MongoDB server, and it's a local server. And this line of code creates a reference to the database collections, allowing you to listen for events such as error or successful connections. And then those two lines of code sets up event lesson for successful or error database collections. When the database collection is established, it's going to show collected to database on the console. Otherwise, it's going to show the error. And I use the app.use function that it adds to the middleware of Express application. It's a building middleware for parsing incoming JSON file, and it makes it easier to work with JSON data. And then later on, I use the line associates with the subscriber routes, and it requires so starting with subscriber, everything starts with /subscribers will be handled by the subscriber route. And later on, it's going to log the console when the server starts. So I'm going to start the server now, npm start. That let me check my. This is my self-defined script that dev start. Now you can see that the server is starting, and then it's connected to the database. So for this function, for this file, it's subscriber.js. It is setting up the express.js router and importing the subscriber model from the file located in the model.subscriber file, which is this. So it's the Mongo schema, and this is basically the CRUD files of in it, which represents create, update, delete, and read of the MongoDB. And for the first function, it's router.get, which is the function that attempts to retrieve all the subscribers from the data source using the subscriber.find method, which is if the operation is successful, it responds with a JSON array containing all the subscribers. If it's an error, it's going to have a 500 code and then shows an error message. And it can also return like a single ID. And it's going to return the JSON file of it. And there is also a get subscriber post method. It's which represents the it creates a new subscriber object, based on the data provided, and it has two schemas, which are the name and the subscribed to channel, and then eventually we save it and then return a JSON file of new subscriber. Otherwise, we catch an error of 400, which is not successfully created. And we can also patch the update the one. Patch means we can also, it's not update because it's not updating the whole thing. It's just patching a single thing like file, or if it's like subscribe to channel. So it's also retrieved by its ID, and it updates the property, and then if it's successful, it also stays it and return a JSON file. Otherwise, we catch an error of 400. And we can also delete the data from the MongoDB by using delete method. We use the function delete one, and then we return the JSON file of message deleted subscriber. And otherwise, if there is a database error, we return code 500. And as you can see, there's a lot of middleware functions that instead of calling delete one, which ID, we can use this middleware functions to simplify our code. And now I'm going to write the middleware functions here. And the middleware function is an asynchronous function called to get subscriber, and it has three parameters of return, rest, and next. It's the next is a function that has control to the next middleware, and this middleware function is designed to fetch a subscriber data from MongoDB database based on the ID parameter. So the first thing we need to think of is a try catch block that and in the try catch block we try the subscriber and we wait for the subscriber to find by ID, and the request dot params dot ID. It tries to find the subscriber by its ID. It uses a wait to make it a synchronous call to the subscriber model and look at up by its ID. And also we need to define the subscriber variable. Right. Subscriptor. And we also want to check if subscriber is null. And if subscriber is null, then let me think. If subscriber is null, and then we return status code of 400 in the JSON file of message. Cannot find subscriber. And otherwise we can't find it. This is like there is also a potential of having the database error, which return rest status code of 500, and we return a JSON file of message of error message. And it's an internal server error. And then eventually we also want to have rest dot subscriber equals to subscriber, which if the subscriber is found successfully and it's not null, then it assigns a retrieved to the rest and make it available to subsequent middleware functions in Express request and response pipeline. And then we also use next. Next is very tricky because it calls to pass control to the next middleware in the route. This is essential because middleware functions in Express should call next to indicate that they have completed the request and to allow the request to continue through the middleware stack. And we can also test it through the API tester. And then, for example, if we send the request, we can see all the data that we have. We can also look for a single one of them. For example, we look for this AA. It's going to show up here. Or did I save it? And then we can also post the data. For example, test. When we test 1, 2, 3, it's also posted. And then we can see it from here that test 1, 2, 3 is here. And then we can also rename the test data to the name tested correctly, and it's updated, and then we can re-see it, and now it's called test correctly. And then we can also delete it by using this in the delete message. So when we check tested correctly, it's gone, so it's deleted. So basically, this is the way we test our APIs, and that's basically everything about Express.js and middleware functions, and also the API testing that I showed you. Thank you.